Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The autumn rain tapped against the windows of the Mercer home as Roland sat at the kitchen table, his calloused fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee. His military-trained eyes scanned the newspaper, but his mind was elsewhere. "Daddy, look what I found." Roland looked up to see his 6-year-old daughter, Marley, standing in the doorway, clutching her stuffed elephant against her chest. "What's that, sweetheart?" Roland set down his newspaper, giving his daughter his full attention. This was their first weekend alone since Nora had left yesterday for another business trip. There's a funny red light behind the vent in the living room. Marley pointed back toward the main room. "It keeps blinking. Is it Monster Eye?" Roland felt a slight tightening in his chest, the same feeling he'd had in Afghanistan when things were too quiet. "Let's go see this monster, shall we?" He followed Marley into the living room, where she pointed at the floor vent near the bay window. Roland crouched down, his knees cracking slightly. Through the slats, he could see a small, rhythmically blinking red LED. "Stay back for a minute, sweetheart." His voice remained calm, but his body tensed. He carefully removed the vent cover and peered inside. What he saw made his blood run cold. The small red light was attached to a circuit board connected to what appeared to be a compact explosive device. His years of military training kicked in immediately. "Marley," he said, keeping his voice steady despite the adrenaline now flooding his system. "Remember our emergency game? The one where we pack really fast?" Marley nodded, her eyes widening slightly. Roland had taught her evacuation protocols disguised as games of habit from his military days that Nora had always called paranoid. "We're going to play that game right now. Go get your backpack, the red one, with the emergency supplies. And grab Ellie." He nodded at the stuffed elephant. "She'll want to come too." As Marley ran upstairs, Roland quickly examined the device without touching it. Military-grade timer. Remote activation capability. This wasn't amateur work, and it certainly wasn't random. Someone had targeted his family with precision that he pulled out his phone, taking several quick photos of the device. Then he moved swiftly, grabbing the go bag he kept in the hall closet, another habit Nora had mocked, and the secure laptop from his office safe. Marley reappeared with her backpack. "I got my important things, Daddy." "Good girl." Roland scooped her up with one arm. "We're going on an adventure, okay? But we need to leave right now. What about Mommy? She's coming back tomorrow." Roland tightened his grip on his daughter. "We'll call her once we're in the car." He carried Marley out to the garage where his truck was parked. After securing her in the booster seat, he quickly checked under the vehicle for any additional devices. Finding nothing, he started the engine and backed out of the driveway. As they turned the corner of their street, Roland glanced in the rearview mirror at the house they'd called home for the past 4 years. His phone buzzed. Nora's face appeared on the screen. Roland hesitated, then declined the call. First, he needed to get Marley somewhere safe. They were 3 miles away when it happened. The explosion wasn't as loud as Roland expected, more of a dull thump that rolled across the quiet neighborhood. But the plume of smoke that rose above the tree line told him everything he needed to know. "Daddy, what was that noise?" Marley asked, clutching her elephant tighter. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart," Roland replied, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Keep playing your game." He pulled into the parking lot of a roadside diner, positioning the truck so he could see both the road they'd traveled and the main highway. His phone buzzed again. Not Nora this time, but a local news alert. "Explosion reported in Oak Ridge neighborhood. Emergency services responding." Roland dialed a number. "Lionel, it's me," he said when the call connected. "I need your help." "Roland." The librarian's voice was calm as always. "What's happening?" "Someone just blew up my house. I need somewhere secure to bring Marley." There was a moment of silence before Lionel responded. "The cabin. Keys in the usual place. I'll meet you there in 2 hours. Bring your equipment." And Lionel, tell no one. Roland ended the call and glanced at Marley in the rearview mirror. She was humming quietly to herself, drawing patterns on the foggy window with her finger. He needed to keep her safe while he figured out who had just tried to murder them. He pulled back onto the road, taking a circuitous route toward the mountains. As they drove, emergency vehicles raced past in the opposite direction, lights flashing against the gray sky. His phone rang again. Nora. This time he answered, putting it on speaker. Roland? Roland, are you there? Her voice was tight with what sounded like panic. I just saw the news. There was an explosion at our house. Are you and Marley okay? Roland met his daughter's eyes in the mirror, putting a finger to his lips. We're fine, he said flatly. We weren't home. Oh, thank God. The relief in her voice sounded genuine. They're saying it was a gas leak. I'm coming home right now. Where are you? I'll meet you. Roland's jaw tightened. Not necessary. We're safe. I'll contact you when I know more. Roland, please. I need to focus on driving. Nora. I'll call you later. He ended the call. Was that Mommy? Marley asked. Yes, honey. She was worried about us. Is she coming to the adventure, too? Roland's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, checking for any vehicles that might have been following them. Not right now. It's just going to be you and me for a little bit. By the time they reached Lionel's cabin, Roland had taken 6 different detours and switched license plates, twice using sets he'd hidden in his go bag for emergencies. As Roland parked behind the cabin, out of sight from the main road, his phone buzzed with another news alert. He read it and felt his suspicions confirmed. Initial reports suggest localized explosion. Fire chief questions gas leak theory. The explosion had been too controlled, too precise. This wasn't an accident. Someone had wanted them dead. Lionel arrived 90 minutes later, his ancient Volvo crunching over the gravel driveway. Roland watched from the window, one hand on the gun he'd retrieved from the cabin's hidden safe. Uncle Lionel. Marley rushed to the door as the tall, thin man entered, his arms laden with grocery bags and a battered leather satchel. Miss Marley. Lionel's serious face softened as he set down his bags to give her a proper hug. I brought hot chocolate and those animal crackers you like. While Marley busied herself in the small kitchen, Lionel moved closer to Roland. I passed by your house on the way here. It's not completely destroyed, but the living room and entry are gone. Fire department and police are calling it a gas explosion. It wasn't, Roland stated flatly. I saw the device before we left. Military-grade timer. Remote activation capability. Someone put it there deliberately. Lionel's expression remained impassive, but his eyes sharpened. Who would want you dead, Roland? That's what we need to figure out. Roland pulled out his phone, showing Lionel the photos he'd taken of the device. I'm going back there tonight. I need to salvage what I can before the evidence disappears. By nightfall, Roland had changed into dark clothes and loaded a small backpack with tools. He'd spent an hour with Marley, reading stories and assuring her he'd be back soon. It's a special mission, but not a dangerous one, he told her, tucking her into bed in the cabin's small loft. And Uncle Lionel makes the best pancakes for breakfast. Better than yours? Marley asked sleepily. Much better. Mine always burn. He kissed her forehead. I love you, sweetheart. The drive back to the house took 40 minutes. Roland parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, using the neighbors' yards and tree cover to avoid being seen. The house was cordoned off with police tape, but no officers remained on site. He slipped in through the backyard, assessing the damage. The front of the house was destroyed, but the back rooms remained largely intact. Using a small flashlight, Roland made his way through the kitchen to what remained of the living room. The explosion had been centered exactly where he'd seen the device, calculated to kill anyone in that room, but not level the entire house. This wasn't about destruction of property, it was about elimination of people. Him and Marley. Roland worked methodically, collecting fragments from the epicenter. Among the debris, he found what he was looking for: a partially melted circuit board. Moving to his home office, he found the door had been forced open, though it appeared untouched by the blast. His locked files had been searched, and a secure server where he kept his home security footage had been tampered with, the recordings from the past week completely erased. Only 2 people had the credentials to access that system remotely: himself and Nora. Dawn was breaking as Roland returned to the cabin. Lionel was already awake, his laptop open on the rustic dining table. Find anything? He asked as Roland placed the circuit board fragments in front of him. The security footage was erased remotely. Someone didn't want to be seen entering the house. Roland pulled off his jacket. I need you to analyze these fragments. See if you can trace the components. The sound of small feet on the stairs interrupted them. Marley appeared, clutching her stuffed elephant. Daddy, you came back. Roland caught her as she jumped into his arms. I told you I would, didn't I? I always keep my promises. Ellie missed you. She thrust the elephant toward him. She kept talking all night. Roland took the stuffed toy, feeling something hard inside it. Did she? What was she saying? She said, she has a secret. Marley lowered her voice to a whisper. Mommy put it inside her before she left. Roland's blood ran cold. Carefully, he felt along the seams of the elephant, finding a small opening that had been recently sewn shut. Inside was a small, hard object. Marley, why don't you help Uncle Lionel with those pancakes he promised? Roland suggested, keeping his voice light. I need to check something in my truck. Once alone, Roland extracted a small flash drive from inside the stuffed animal. Whatever was on it, Nora had wanted Marley to have it or Roland to find it. He connected it to his secure laptop, running virus scans before opening the contents. The drive contained only one folder labeled Insurance, with dozens of encrypted emails. By mid-afternoon, they had access to the correspondence between Nora and someone identified only as a W. The most recent email made Roland's stomach turn. We only need a few hours. Then it's done. He won't survive, and the girl will frame it as a fire. It's the only way. The timestamp was from the morning Nora left. Roland stared at the screen, a cold rage building inside him. His wife had not only betrayed him, she planned to murder him and their daughter. EW, he muttered. We need to find out who that is. Already working on it, Lionel replied, his fingers moving across the keyboard. But Roland, you need to prepare yourself. If Nora is involved in this, then she's no longer my wife, Roland finished, his voice like ice. She's just a target. That night, after Marley had gone to bed, Roland and Lionel spread the contents of the flash drive across the cabin's dining table. Printed emails, financial records, and fragments of conversations told a disturbing story. Most of these emails are from the last 6 months, Lionel observed, arranging them chronologically. But there are references to conversations going back almost 2 years. Roland studied a particularly cryptic exchange. The contingency is in place. If he suspects anything, we implement Plan B. She's been planning this for a long time, he said, his voice hollow. While I was teaching Marley to ride a bike and planning our anniversary trip, my wife was figuring out how to kill us. Lionel adjusted his glasses. Not just that. Look at these financial transfers. There's a pattern here. Large sums moving through shell companies, then disappearing into offshore accounts. Money laundering on an impressive scale. Multiple countries, multiple currencies. Whoever EW is, they're professional. This isn't just about eliminating you, it's about covering financial tracks. Roland picked up a printout of one of the earliest emails. Here, Nora mentions the military contract review. That must be connected to her work at Strat SEC. The security contractor, she's been there for 5 years. Advanced to senior strategist last year. Roland's jaw tightened. With access to classified information and international clients. Lionel typed rapidly on his laptop. If we cross-reference the dates of these transfers with Strat SEC's known military contracts, the computer screen filled with data points, forming a clear pattern of correlation. There it is, Lionel said grimly. Every major transfer follows a Strat SEC contract announcement by exactly 14 days. They're skimming for military security contracts. And I was the liability, Roland concluded. The husband who might notice unexplained income or suspicious behavior. What about Marley? Lionel asked quietly. Why target her too? Roland's expression darkened. Insurance. A child's death makes it less likely anyone would suspect the grieving mother. As they worked through the night, piecing together the conspiracy, Roland's phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Nora, each one more desperate than the last. He ignored them all, focusing instead on the final email from the flash drive, the one that confirmed his wife's betrayal in her own words. Everything is set for Friday. The device will activate remotely at 9 p.m. when they're both typically in the living room. The fire should destroy any evidence. By the time they realize it wasn't an accident, we'll be established in the new location with the funds secured. Remember, we agreed quick and clean. No loose ends. No loose ends. That's what his wife and her accomplice had called the murder of a 6-year-old girl. Roland felt something harden inside him, something cold and resolved. Nora had planned meticulously, but so would he. And unlike her, he wouldn't fail. Dawn broke over the mountains as Roland loaded the last of their supplies into his truck. 3 days had passed since the explosion, and it was time to move. Staying in one location for too long was a risk he couldn't afford. "Where are we going now, Daddy?" Marley asked, clutching her backpack to her chest. "To see Aunt Penny," Roland replied, helping her into the booster seat. "She has a special place where we can stay for a while." "What about school?" "Ms. Wilson will miss me." Roland secured her seatbelt, his heart aching at the normalcy his daughter craved. "We're taking a special vacation. I've already talked to your school." The lie came easily. In truth, he'd contacted no one, leaving no digital footprint that could be traced. As far as the world knew, Roland and Marley Mercer had vanished in a thin air after surviving a tragic gas explosion. Lionel approached the truck, carrying a small package. "Burner phones," he said quietly, handing them to Roland. "Untraceable. Check in every 12 hours. Same protocol as before." "What about the Strat SEC angle?" "Working on it. I've identified 3 employees with the initials EW. I'm narrowing it down." Lionel glanced at Marley, then lowered his voice further. "Nora's been making waves. Filed a missing persons report yesterday. Police aren't taking it seriously, yet they figure you're just staying with family after the explosion." "Good. Keep it that way." Roland clapped his friend on the shoulder. "Watch your back. These people don't mess around." The drive to Penny's remote cabin took 4 hours, with Roland taking multiple detours and changing vehicles at a prearranged location. His sister had always valued her privacy, choosing to live off the grid in a secluded woodland property that didn't appear on any official records. When they finally arrived, Penny was waiting on the porch, her arms crossed over her tattooed forearms. At 29, she looked more like Roland than either of them cared to admit. The same watchful eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw. Uncle Roland brought a friend. She called over her shoulder as they approached. From behind the cabin, a woman with close-cropped dark hair emerged, her stance alert but relaxed. Roland recognized her immediately. "Raven," he acknowledged with a nod. "Didn't expect to see you here." Penny called. "Said you needed someone who knows fire." Raven Cole, his former neighbor and ex-firefighter, studied him carefully. "Figure my expertise might come in handy." Inside the cabin, while Penny showed Marley the small art studio where she created her tattoo designs, Roland briefed Raven on the situation. "You're telling me your wife tried to blow you up?" Raven's eyebrows rose. "The same woman who organized that charity auction for the fire department last year. The very same." Roland spread out the evidence he'd gathered. "She and someone at her company are laundering money through military contracts. We were loose ends." Raven studied the emails, her expression hardening. "And they were willing to kill a child to cover their tracks." "What do you need from me?" "Protection from Marley. Someone Nora doesn't know well, but who can handle themselves in a crisis." Roland met her eyes. "I can't be with her 24/7 while I hunt these people down. I need someone I can trust." "You've got it," Raven said without hesitation. "But you should know if they come for her, I won't just be defensive." "I'm counting on that." Roland turned as Penny and Marley returned. "Hey, sweetheart, did you see Aunt Penny's drawings?" Marley nodded enthusiastically. "She's going to teach me how to draw dragons." "Can I, Daddy?" "Please." "Of course." Roland forced a smile. "Why don't you get your coloring thing set up while I talk to Aunt Penny for a minute?" Once Marley was occupied, Roland pulled his sister aside. "I need you to teach her more than dragons. The counter-surveillance protocols we learned as kids, make them into games she'll remember." Penny's expression grew serious. "She's 6, Roland, and someone tried to kill her 3 days ago." His voice was tight. "I need her prepared, not scared. You know how to do that." That evening, as Roland prepared to leave, Marley grew agitated. "You can't go, Daddy. You promised we'd stay together. Her small face crumpled with fear. Roland knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Remember when we talked about brave knights who go on quests? Sometimes they have to leave the castle to fight the dragon, but they always come back. But what if the dragon gets you? Tears welled in her eyes. Then you'll be safe with Aunt Penny and Ms. Raven. But that won't happen. He tapped her chest, right above her heart. I'll always be right here, even when you can't see me. And I've never broken a promise to you, have I? Marley shook her head, sniffling. Draw what you remember, okay? All the things you've seen and heard like we practiced. This was more than comfort. It was strategy. Marley's uncanny memory for details had always amazed him. As if understanding, Marley's expression grew solemn, like the black box Mommy gave the man. Roland froze. What man, sweetheart? The tall man who came to our house when you were teaching your class. Mommy gave him a black box and said, "This ends now." Marley tilted her head. She looked sad after. She didn't know I was watching from the stairs. When was this? Roland kept his voice level, though his pulse quickened, before she went on her trip. The day we had pizza for dinner. 2 days before the explosion. Roland met Raven's eyes over Marley's head, seeing his own suspicions confirmed in her gaze. Can you draw this man for me? What'd it look like? Marley nodded. He was fancy, like the men in Mommy's office. As Marley began to draw, Roland pulled Penny aside. I need you to secure this place. Full perimeter alerts, escape routes mapped and rehearsed. Raven stays with Marley at all times. And where will you be? Hunting, Roland replied, his voice cold. Starting with Strat SEC. Lionel's cramped office in the back of the town library smelled of old books and freshly brewed coffee. Maps and printouts covered every available surface, and 3 computer monitors displayed various data feeds. 3 EWs at Strat SEC, Lionel explained, pointing to employee profiles. Edward Winters, accounts payable. Elizabeth Walters, human resources. And Elijah Ward, strategic operations. Roland studied the photographs. Ward, he said finally. I've seen him before. At company functions. I thought so too. Lionel pulled up another screen. His background is interesting. Former military contractor with extensive international experience. Specialized in problem resolution for high-value clients. That's corporate speak for eliminating obstacles, Roland observed. What's his connection to Nora? Lionel hesitated. They're close. Very close. He opened a folder containing surveillance photos. These were taken last month at a hotel in Seattle. Not exactly a business meeting. The images showed Nora and a tall, well-dressed man entering a hotel room, his hand possessively on the small of her back. Roland felt a strange emptiness as he looked at them. Not jealousy or hurt, just confirmation of what he already suspected. So Nora and Ward are lovers as well as business partners. It appears so. Lionel pulled up financial records. And they've been busy. In the past 18 months, approximately $12 million has disappeared through a network of shell companies. The pattern suggests they're skimming from classified military contracts, the ones Nora has been strategizing and Ward has been implementing. Roland studied the money trail. These transfers require dual authentication. Both of them are involved, and they needed you gone because... Lionel brought up a calendar. Because the annual security audit is next month. Roland finished connecting the dots. Strat SEC would be required to open their books completely. Any discrepancies would be flagged. Exactly. They're running out of time to cover their tracks. Lionel clicked through more documents. There's more. Ward has a history of eliminating problems cleanly. 3 whistleblowers at previous companies died in accidents shortly after raising concerns about financial irregularities. Nothing was ever proven. And now with the next accident. Roland's expression hardened. What about his resources? Does he have people who could help execute something like this? One name keeps coming up. Victor Lang. Lionel displayed the profile of a hard-faced man with cold eyes. Former mercenary. Specialized in extraction and elimination. Now works as a security consultant for StratSEC's Special Projects Division. Roland pulled up Marley's drawing a surprisingly detailed sketch of a tall man in a suit, his features sharp and predatory. Even through a child's eyes, Elijah Ward was unmistakable. "We have motive, means, and opportunity," Roland said. "Now we need hard evidence that will stand up in court. Enough to bring them both down permanently. That won't be easy. They've covered their tracks well, but not perfectly." Roland pointed to a discrepancy in the financial reports. "Every system has weaknesses. We just need to find theirs." They worked through the night, mapping connections and planning their approach. By morning, they had the outline of a strategy. "It's not about emotion," Roland explained, pinning locations on a map. "It's about precision. We study their movements, identify patterns, create redundant evidence trails, and coordinate with multiple agencies simultaneously. You could just kill them," Lionel observed mildly. "With your background, you could make it look like an accident." Roland shook his head. "Death is too quick, too clean. I want them to lose everything: their freedom, their reputation, their future. I want them to live with the consequences of what they've done." "Revenge served cold," Lionel nodded. "It's going to take time." "Not too much." Roland checked his watch. "They've already made their first mistake. They underestimated me. They'll make more." For 11 days, Roland had methodically built his case against Nora and Ward. While they believed him distracted by grief and confusion, he'd been tracking their movements, documenting their actions, and laying traps to expose their operation. The emotional husband they expected to be paralyzed by betrayal didn't exist. In his place was the cold, calculating tactician his military commanders had valued, a man who understood that emotion was the enemy of precision. The warehouse district stood empty and silent in the pre-dawn light, abandoned buildings looming against the gray sky. Roland moved silently through the shadows, his military training evident in every calculated step. This was the 5th location he'd surveilled in 10 days of property owned by one of Ward's shell companies. Tonight, his patience had been rewarded. Through his binoculars, Roland watched as a black SUV pulled up to the loading dock. 2 men emerged, one he recognized immediately as Victor Lang. They unloaded several metal cases, carrying them inside the warehouse. Roland documented everything, the camera's quiet shutter capturing evidence with each click. His phone vibrated silently. A text from Lionel. "Financial transfers complete. $2.3 million moved to Cayman account number 45692. Ward scheduled to access tomorrow." Another piece in place. Roland checked his watch. In 4 hours, Lionel would anonymously transmit the first batch of evidence to the Financial Crimes Division of the FBI. Not enough to make an arrest, but sufficient to open an investigation. The first domino in a carefully arranged line. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Raven. "Marley's asking for you," she said without preamble when he answered. "Had a nightmare about the explosion. Could use her dad." Roland's carefully constructed walls wavered slightly. "Put her on." "Daddy." Marley's small voice came through, thick with tears. "When are you coming back? The bad dreams won't stop." "Soon, sweetheart," he promised, moving away from the warehouse toward his concealed vehicle. "I'm working on making things safe for us." Mommy called Aunt Penny's phone. She was crying. Roland tensed. "Mommy called? When?" "Yesterday. Aunt Penny didn't know I was listening. Mommy said she needed to talk to you right away." She sounded scared. Of course she was scared. Their plan was unraveling, and she knew it. Nora was trying to locate them, perhaps to finish what she'd started or to cover her tracks. "Listen to me, Marley. If Mommy calls again, you don't talk to her, okay? And you tell Aunt Penny right away. Are you mad at Mommy?" The simple question from his daughter cut through his tactical mindset. How did you explain to a 6-year-old that her mother had tried to murder her? "It's complicated, sweetheart. But I promise, when this is all over, I'll explain everything." After reassuring Marley, Roland refocused on his mission. Sentiment was a luxury he couldn't afford right now. Back at the small apartment he'd rented under a false name, Roland added the latest surveillance photos to the evidence wall. His phone rang a direct call on his secure line. Only 3 people had this number. "Lionel, what's happened? We have a problem." The librarian's voice was tense. "Someone accessed your old email account. They're trying to trace your movements." "Ward." "No." The access point was Nora's laptop. She's hunting for you on her own. Roland considered this development. Can you track her? Already am. She's staying at the Westlake Hotel downtown, not at your house. She's been accessing StratSEC's secure server after hours, downloading files. She's preparing to run, Roland concluded, or building her own insurance policy against Ward. This was an opportunity Roland hadn't anticipated. If Nora and Ward were no longer fully aligned, he could exploit the division. Keep tracking her, he instructed, and accelerate the timeline on the financial evidence. I want the FBI looking at those accounts by tomorrow. What about Ward's enforcer? If they feel cornered, Lang might become more aggressive in finding you and Marley. Roland's jaw tightened. Let him try. I've faced better men in worse conditions. Change of plans, Roland decided. We're going to give Lang a target he can't resist. The multi-level parking garage in downtown Seattle offered exactly what Roland needed: multiple entry points, limited security cameras, and enough concrete to absorb sound. That he parked on the third level, deliberately selecting a spot partially visible from the main entrance but obscured from security cameras. Then he made a call from the burner phone Lionel had designated as the track device. I have what you want, Roland said when the call connected to Nora's private line. The original drive and all copies. Roland. Her voice was a mixture of relief and wariness. Where are you? We need to talk. Parking garage at Westlake Center. Level 3. 1 hour. He ended the call before she could respond. She wouldn't come alone. That was the point. Roland positioned himself not where he'd indicated, but on the level above, with clear sight lines to his parked vehicle. The waiting was the easy part. Combat had taught him patience, the ability to remain perfectly still for hours while anticipating multiple scenarios. 53 minutes after his call, a sleek black sedan entered the garage. It circled once before parking 3 spaces away from Roland's decoy vehicle. The driver remained inside, engine running. 0.7 minutes later, a second car arrived in Nora's silver Audi. She parked near the entrance, hesitating before getting out. Even from a distance, Roland could see the tension in her posture as she scanned the garage, but it was the third arrival that confirmed his suspicions. Victor Lang, entering on foot from the stairwell, moving with the practiced efficiency of a predator. He positioned himself behind a concrete pillar, his hand inside his jacket where a weapon would be concealed. They'd set a trap. Not realizing they were walking into one, Roland activated the first of his prepared devices, a small electromagnetic pulse that would temporarily disable the garage's already minimal security system and any communication devices within 50 feet. Nora approached the decoy vehicle, calling out tentatively, Roland, are you here? Lang emerged from his position, moving to flank the empty car. It was the moment Roland had anticipated. He triggered the second device, a series of bright flashbangs that erupted around the parked vehicles, disorienting without causing permanent damage. In the confusion, Lang fired 2 shots toward the source of the disturbance, exactly as Roland had predicted. The controlled chaos allowed Roland to move unseen to his pre-positioned exit point. As he slipped away, he activated the final element of his plan, a small camera he'd hidden earlier, capturing Lang's armed presence and unprovoked gunfire in the garage. By the time the garage's security system reactivated, Roland was 3 blocks away, watching through a secure feed as police responded to reports of gunshots. Lang had escaped, but not before being clearly recorded by Roland's hidden camera and by the traffic camera Roland had carefully repositioned that morning to cover the garage exit. His phone buzzed with a message from Lionel. Facial recognition got him. Running it through the system now. The trap had worked perfectly. Victor Lang was now identifiable and on law enforcement radar. More importantly, his aggressive response had confirmed Roland's theory they weren't just looking to find him. They were still trying to eliminate him. 20 minutes later, Lionel sent the information he'd been waiting for. Got him. Lang operating from warehouse in industrial district. Same one from your surveillance. Sending coordinates. The noose was tightening. Lang had made his first serious mistake, and it wouldn't be his last. The secure call to Nora was arranged through a complex routing system Lionel had designed, making it impossible to trace back to Roland's actual location. Roland? Is that really you? Nora's voice came through, a mixture of relief and anxiety. It's me. He kept his tone neutral, revealing nothing of the cold rage that had settled in his chest. You've been trying to reach me. Thank God. I've been so worried. The police aren't doing anything. They think you're just taking time after the accident. Are you and Marley safe? Where are you? The concern in her voice sounded genuine, which only heightened Roland's disgust. She'd always been convincing. It was what made her so effective in corporate negotiations. We're alive, he said flatly. No thanks to whoever planted that explosive in our living room. A pause. Explosive? Roland, it was a gas leak. That's what the fire department determined. Stop lying, Nora. I saw the device before we left. Another pause, longer this time. If that's true, then someone targeted us. That's even more reason for you and Marley to come home, where I can protect you. Protect us. Roland allowed a hint of his contempt to show. The way you protected the Kingston file? It was a calculated risk, a reference to a file that didn't exist. But if Nora was involved in the attempt on their lives, she'd be hypersensitive to any mention of potentially incriminating evidence. Her response was immediate and revealing. What do you know about Kingston? The false warmth had vanished from her voice, replaced by sharp intensity. Enough to understand why someone might want me silenced, Roland replied, watching the recording software track the stress patterns in her voice. The question is, how much does Ward know about your separate arrangements? Ward? Elijah Ward? She attempted to sound confused, but the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. My colleague? What does he have to do with this? You tell me, Nora. You're the one who's been meeting him at the Harborview Hotel every Thursday for the past 4 months. A sharp intake of breath. You've been spying on me? I've been aware, Roland corrected. The same way I'm aware of the $12 million that's been moved through accounts in the Caymans and Singapore. Roland, listen to me. Nora's voice dropped, becoming urgent. You don't understand what's happening. I'm not the enemy here. There are things I need to explain in person, like why you put an explosive device in our home, or why you told Ward that Marley was an acceptable casualty. What? No. The denial seemed genuinely horrified, but Roland had long since stopped trusting his wife's performances. I would never hurt Marley. Never. Roland, you have to believe me. The way I believed you were on a business trip when you were actually setting up our murder. His voice remained calm, but each word was edged with ice. I saw the emails, Nora. We only need a few hours. Then it's done. He won't survive, and the girl will frame it as a fire. Silence stretched between them. How did you get those? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You put them on a flash drive inside Marley's stuffed elephant. Did you have second thoughts? Or was it just another layer of insurance? It's not what you think. Nora's voice had changed again, dropping the pretense of innocence. I needed evidence. Protection. Against who? Your partner? The authorities? Or did you just want to ensure you'd be the last one standing when everything fell apart? You don't know what Ward is capable of, she hissed. What he's forced me to do. I'm trapped, Roland, and I'm supposed to believe you're the victim. Roland's laugh was short and brittle. The same woman who orchestrated a complex money laundering scheme through military contracts, who slept with her co-conspirator while planning her family's murder. It wasn't supposed to be like this, Nora insisted. It started small, just redirecting funds from overinflated contracts. No one was getting hurt. Then Ward wanted more, and when I tried to back out, she trailed off. He threatened you, Roland supplied, watching the conversation's trajectory carefully. He threatened Marley, Nora corrected. Said if I didn't help finish what we started, he'd make sure I lost everything, including her. It was plausible. Ward had the profile of someone who would use threats to maintain control. But it didn't explain the emails in Nora's own words, the careful planning she'd participated in, and the explosive device. Roland pressed. Was that Ward's idea too? A hesitation that told him everything. Roland, please. I need to see you, to explain properly, face to face, so you can finish what you started, so I can protect my daughter. Nora's voice cracked. I made terrible mistakes, but I never wanted either of you hurt. The flash drive, I gave it to Marley because I knew you'd find it if anything happened to me. It was insurance against Ward, not you. Roland had heard enough. Whether Nora was telling a partial truth or crafting another elaborate lie, Her involvement was confirmed by her own words. If you want to protect Marley, turn yourself in. Confess everything about the laundered money, Ward's involvement, all of it. They'll arrest me, she protested. I'll lose everything. You already have, Roland stated coldly. The only question now is whether you face the consequences with some shred of dignity or whether you go down with Ward when everything collapses. Roland, one more thing, he interrupted. If anything happens to Marley, if Ward or his people come anywhere near her, I will hold you personally responsible. And Nora? You know what I'm capable of. He ended the call, the threat hanging in the air between them. The conversation had confirmed his suspicions. Nora was trying to distance herself from Ward, possibly preparing to blame him entirely for their crimes. But her slip about the explosive device had revealed her complicity beyond any doubt. Roland forwarded the recorded call to Lionel, adding, "She's running scared. Accelerate the timeline. It's time to end this." The headquarters of Strat SEC occupied 15 floors of a gleaming glass tower in downtown Seattle. On this particular morning, the main conference room on the top floor was set for a major presentation Strat SEC's annual security briefing to potential military and government clients. Perfect timing for what Roland had planned. From his position in a building across the street, Roland watched through high-powered binoculars as the room filled with uniformed officers, government officials, and corporate executives. Nora was there, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her composure betraying nothing of her recent distress. Beside her stood Elijah Ward, tall and confident, his hand occasionally touching her elbow in a gesture that might appear supportive to observers, but which Roland recognized as possessive. Teams in position. Roland asked into his secure comm link. FBI Financial Crimes Unit entering the building now. Lionel confirmed from his position in the surveillance van parked 2 blocks away. 6 agents, plus digital forensics team. They have the warrants for all Strat SEC servers and Ward's personal devices. Interpol, representatives present in the conference as observers. They're coordinating with FBI for the international accounts. Media, Channel 4 investigative team arriving in 3 minutes. Anonymous tip about major financial crimes at a prominent security contractor was too juicy to ignore. Everything was in place. The culmination of 2 weeks of meticulous planning, evidence gathering, and strategic leaks to the right authorities. Activating Phase 1, Roland stated, pressing a button on his laptop. Across the street, the oversized screens in StratSEC's conference room suddenly flickered. Instead of the planned corporate imagery, they showed financial records, email exchanges, and transfer confirmations. All the evidence of Ward and Nora's money laundering operation lay bare before the assembled military and government representatives. Through his binoculars, Roland watched the room erupt into confusion. Ward lunged for the control panel, but it was too late. The system had been locked by Lionel's remote access. Nora's face had gone pale, her practiced composure crumbling as she recognized exactly what was being displayed. Phase 2, Roland instructed, in the StratSEC server room 12 floors below, the carefully planted digital breadcrumbs activated. Every device on the network received the same undeniable evidence that had just been displayed in the conference room. Simultaneously, the same information was transmitted to the personal devices of every board member, major client, and financial partner of StratSEC. FBI team has reached the conference floor, Lionel reported. Interpol agents moving to secure positions. Channel 4 news van just pulled up outside the main entrance. Roland watched as the conference room doors opened and federal agents entered, led by a stern-faced woman in a dark suit. The military representatives were already on their feet, faces tight with anger and shock that Ward's reaction was immediate and desperate. He lunged for his phone, likely to trigger some contingency plan, but one of the FBI agents intercepted him. Nora, instead of resisting, seemed to collapse into a chair, her head in her hands. "Victor Lang?" Roland asked, still watching the scene unfold. "Secondary team apprehended him at the warehouse 30 minutes ago," Lionel confirmed. "They found quite the arsenal, including components matching those from your house." "He's not talking," but he doesn't need to. The evidence speaks for itself. Roland allowed himself a moment of cold satisfaction as he watched federal agents handcuff Ward and read him his rights. The cameras from Channel 4 were capturing everything: the arrest, the shocked faces of the military clients, the damning evidence still displayed on the conference room screens. "Nora's being taken into custody," Lionel reported. "She's not resisting." Through his binoculars, Roland caught one last glimpse of his wife as agents led her toward the elevator. For a brief moment, she looked toward the windows, as if sensing his presence across the street. Her expression was a complex mixture of defeat, fear, and something else, perhaps a realization of just how thoroughly she had been outmaneuvered. "It's done," Roland said quietly, lowering the binoculars. "Send the secondary evidence package to the prosecutor's office. I want no chance of technicalities or deals." As he packed away his equipment, Roland's phone buzzed with a message from Raven. "Marley's asking when you're coming home. What should I tell her?" For the first time in weeks, Roland allowed himself to think beyond the mission, beyond revenge. "Tell her I'm on my way," he replied. "We're safe now." The federal courthouse stood like a fortress against the gray Seattle sky, its stone columns and broad steps filled with reporters and curious onlookers. Inside courtroom 3, Roland sat in the back row, anonymous in a dark suit and glasses, watching as Elijah Ward was led in by U.S. Marshals. 2 months had passed since the arrests. 2 months of investigations, evidence compilation, and pre-trial hearings. Today marked the beginning of Ward's sentencing after his failed attempt to negotiate a plea deal. Ward looked different now, his expensive suits replaced by prison orange, his confident posture diminished by confinement. Yet his eyes retained their calculating coldness as they swept across the courtroom, briefly meeting Roland's gaze without recognition. The proceedings moved with methodical precision. The prosecutor laid out the extent of Ward's crimes with devastating clarity. "Your Honor, the defendant has been convicted of 27 federal counts, including money laundering, wire fraud, misappropriation of government funds, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempted murder." She gestured to the evidence displays. Through a sophisticated scheme spanning 4 years, Mr. Ward diverted over $12 million from classified military security contracts, placing national security at risk and violating the trust placed in his position. Ward's attorney offered weak counterarguments about cooperation and diminished responsibility. "My client maintains that he was manipulated by his co-defendant, Mrs. Mercer, who had the primary access to these accounts and who—" The judge interrupted, her expression stern. "Counselor, the evidence clearly shows Mr. Ward's digital fingerprints on every transaction. The jury has already rejected this defense." As the sentencing recommendations were presented, Roland noticed Lionel slip quietly into the courtroom, taking a seat beside him. "Interpol just froze the last of his hidden accounts in Macau," Lionel whispered. $3.2 million. His contingency fund is gone." Roland nodded slightly. Another piece of Ward's carefully constructed escape plan dismantled. In the 2 months since the arrest, international banks had systematically cut ties with Ward's network. His assets had been seized. His reputation had been destroyed through meticulously timed media releases detailing not just the financial crimes, but his history of eliminating whistleblowers. "The defendant will rise," Judge Menendez instructed. Ward stood, his handcuffs rattling slightly. "Elijah Ward, this court has rarely seen crimes of such calculation and moral bankruptcy," the judge began, her voice carrying throughout the silent courtroom. "You have abused positions of trust, stolen from taxpayers, placed military personnel at risk through compromised security systems, and attempted to murder a family, including a child, to cover your crimes." Ward's jaw tightened, but he remained silent. "It is the judgment of this court that you be committed to the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons for a term of 150 years. You will serve this sentence at the Administrative Maximum Facility in Florence, Colorado, with no possibility of parole." A murmur ran through the courtroom. ADX Florence, the Alcatraz of the Rockies, housed the most dangerous federal prisoners in conditions of extreme isolation and security. Additionally, You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $18 million, representing the stolen funds plus damages. The judge's gaze was unflinching. Mr. Ward, you have used your intelligence and skills to destroy lives. Now you will spend the remainder of your life contemplating the consequences of your actions. As the marshals led Ward away, his eyes searched the courtroom one last time. This time, Roland allowed their gazes to meet fully, removing his glasses in a deliberate gesture of revelation. Recognition flashed across Ward's face, followed by shock, and then a cold hatred. Roland held the stare without expression until Ward was escorted through the side door. That's the end of Elijah Ward, Lionel observed quietly as they left the courthouse. From corporate strategist to supermax inmate. Quite a fall. It's exactly what he deserved, Roland replied, his voice dispassionate. Someone who would order the murder of a child doesn't deserve daylight or freedom. That night, as Roland reviewed the final media reports on Ward's sentencing, his phone rang. It was Raven. Marley saw the news. She said without preamble. One of the kids at school told her that her mom's business friend is going to jail forever. Roland closed his eyes briefly. What did she take it? She has questions. Questions I can't answer for you. I'll be home tomorrow night, Roland promised. After Nora's sentencing. Roland. Raven's voice grew serious. You've gotten your revenge. Ward is finished. Nora will be too. At some point, you need to focus on healing your daughter, not just avenging her. The words struck deeper than Roland wanted to admit. For months, his focus had been singular. Eliminate the threat, punish the betrayal. But Raven was right. Marley needed more than safety now. She needed understanding. I know, he acknowledged. One more day, then it's finished. The courtroom for Nora's sentencing was more crowded than Ward's had been. The story of a corporate executive who had conspired to murder her husband and child had captured the public's imagination in a way that financial crimes alone had not. Roland arrived early, taking a seat in the second row where Nora would be certain to see him. This time, he made no attempt to disguise his presence. When the side door opened and Nora entered escorted by female marshals, the room fell silent. She wore a simple gray dress instead of a prison jumpsuit, a small concession from her legal team to present her more sympathetically. Her eyes found Roland immediately, widening with a complex emotion he couldn't fully decipher. He met her gaze steadily, his expression revealing nothing of the storm that had driven him for months. The proceedings began with the prosecution's summary of the case against her. Your Honor, while Mrs. Mercer has pled guilty to reduced charges in exchange for her testimony against Mr. Ward, the gravity of her crimes cannot be understated, the prosecutor began. She actively participated in the embezzlement of military contract funds. More disturbingly, evidence shows she was not merely complicit in the plot to murder her husband and child, she initiated it. Roland watched Nora's shoulders tense at these words. Her attorney quickly stood. Your Honor, my client has fully cooperated with authorities. She has expressed profound remorse for her actions, which were influenced by Mr. Ward's coercion and threats. Objection, the prosecutor interrupted. The evidence does not support this characterization. Mrs. Mercer's own emails, which she authenticated during testimony, show she suggested the home explosion as the method of elimination. The judge nodded. Sustained. Continue. The prosecutor displayed a projection of the most damning email, the one Roland had first discovered in Marley's stuffed elephant. Nora's words glowed on the screen. The device in the living room vent is the cleanest solution. They'll be there for story time at 8. By the time anyone suspects it wasn't an accident, we'll be established elsewhere. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Nora's head bowed, unable to look at her own words. Finally, Nora herself was permitted to speak. She rose slowly, her handcuffed wrists resting on the table before her. Your Honor, she began, her voice barely above a whisper, I cannot undo what I've done. I betrayed my family and violated every principle I claim to uphold. Her voice cracked slightly. I allowed greed and ambition to corrupt me completely, to the point where I participated in a plan that would have killed my own child. She turned slightly, looking directly at Roland. No apology can ever be sufficient. No explanation can justify my actions. I can only say that in my darkest moments, I did try to leave evidence that might protect them if I couldn't. Roland's expression remained impassive. The flash drive had indeed been Nora's attempt at insurance, but against Ward, not for her family's protection. The evidence had made that clear. I accept whatever sentence the court imposes, Nora concluded, knowing that no punishment could equal the pain I've caused or the trust I've destroyed. As she sat down, Roland noticed something he hadn't expected: the complete absence of her family. Nora's parents, her sister, her close friends, none were present. In the weeks following her arrest, they had publicly disowned her, unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the calculated criminal revealed in court. The judge studied Nora for a long moment before delivering her sentence. "Mrs. Mercer, your guilty plea and cooperation have been considered by this court. However, the premeditated nature of your crimes and the particular betrayal of planning violence against your own child require significant consequences." Nora nodded slightly, her eyes downcast. "You are hereby sentenced to 75 years in federal prison, with mandatory psychological evaluation and treatment. You will serve this sentence at the Federal Medical Center, Carswell, with no possibility of early release." The sentence, effectively life imprisonment for a woman in her late 30s, landed heavily in the courtroom. Nora swayed slightly, but remained standing. "Additionally," the judge continued, "you are stripped of all parental rights regarding your daughter, Marley Mercer. Full and permanent custody is awarded to her father, Roland Mercer." At this, Nora's composure finally broke. A small, wounded sound escaped her as she pressed her handcuffed hands to her mouth. "Mrs. Mercer, the court rarely sees crimes that combine financial greed with such profound betrayal of family. You have lost not only your freedom today, but the right to call yourself a mother." As the marshals moved to escort Nora from the courtroom, she turned toward Roland one last time. Their eyes met across the crowded room, hers filled with tears, his cold and unyielding. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions about his feelings toward his ex-wife, whether he could ever forgive her, how his daughter was coping. Roland pushed through them without comment, Lionel running interference at his side. Only when they reached the relative quiet of the parking garage did he speak. "It's done," he said simply. "It is," Lionel agreed. "Ward and Nora will spend the rest of their lives in prison. The money has been recovered. Victor Lang is facing his own charges for the attempted murder and prior crimes." "Now comes the harder part," Roland said, his voice softening slightly. "Helping Marley understand. Rebuilding our lives." As he drove away from the courthouse, Roland felt the weight of the past months beginning to lift. The single-minded focus that had driven him identify the threat, neutralize it, achieve justice had served its purpose. Now he needed to find his way back to being a father first, a protector second. Spring came softly to the mountain cabin that Roland had purchased as their new home. Located 30 miles from the nearest town, with sweeping views of forest and distant peaks, it offered both the security Roland required and the natural beauty Marley needed to heal. 4 months had passed since Nora's sentencing. For months of careful rebuilding, of establishing new routines, of learning how to be a single father to a child who still sometimes woke crying from nightmares about explosions and betrayal. Roland stood on the wide porch, watching as Marley explored the newly planted garden with Penny. His sister had moved into a small guest house on the property, her tattoo business now operating from a converted barn where clients willing to make the journey could find her. Her presence had been crucial in helping Marley adjust to their new reality. "She's getting better with the high places," Raven observed, joining Roland on the porch. She handed him a mug of coffee. "Yesterday, she climbed all the way up to the lookout rock without freezing." Roland nodded. Marley's fear of heights had developed after the explosion, a trauma response they were working through patiently. "The therapist says her progress is remarkable," he replied. "Children are resilient when they feel safe." Raven had become a permanent fixture in their lives as well, initially staying to help with Marley's security, but gradually transitioning to something more: a friend, a support, a potential future Roland wasn't yet ready to fully consider, but no longer automatically rejected. How about you? She asked, studying his profile. Any more of those night walks with your gun? Roland's mouth tightened slightly. She'd caught him twice in the early days, patrolling the perimeter of their property at 3 a.m., checking security systems that were already state-of-the-art. Not for a few weeks, he admitted. The new medication helps. The PTSD diagnosis had come as no surprise. Between his military background and the recent trauma, the nightmares and hypervigilance were almost inevitable. What had surprised him was his willingness to accept treatment, something he would have rejected before Marley. For her, he had learned to acknowledge his own wounds needed healing too. Penny's planning a camping trip next weekend, Raven mentioned. Just up to the North Ridge. Short hike, one night under the stars. Marley's excited about it. Roland smiled slightly. The survival training continues. More like the being a normal kid training, Raven corrected gently. Though Penny did mention teaching her to identify edible plants and build a proper fire. Good skills to have, Roland asserted, but without the intensity that would have colored such a statement months ago. They watched as Penny showed Marley how to plant wildflower seeds along the garden border, the child's delighted laughter carrying across the spring air. She's drawing again, Roland said after a moment. Not just memories of before. New things. Future things. Later, after Marley had gone to bed with her new books, the adults gathered in the living room. Lionel placed a folder on the coffee table. Ward's appeal was rejected, he reported. Unanimously. The evidence was too overwhelming. He'll remain at ADX Florence for the rest of his life. Roland nodded, unsurprised. And Nora? Lionel's expression grew more complex. She's cooperating with ongoing investigations into Stratesi-Cease other operations. Apparently, there are more illegal activities than even we uncovered. In exchange, she's been transferred to a medium security facility. Roland's jaw tightened. Is there a chance of reduced sentence? No, Lionel assured him. The terms of her plea deal were explicit. No matter how much she cooperates, the minimum 75 years remains in place. She'll never be free. 8 months after the sentencing, life had settled into a new kind of normal. Roland had established a small security consulting business he ran from home, allowing him to remain present for Marley while using his skills productively. Penny's tattoo studio had gained a reputation that brought clients from across the state. Raven had taken a position with the local fire department, her apartment in town gradually emptying as more of her belongings migrated to the cabin. It was during one of Lionel's regular visits that he brought the package. This came through official channels, Lionel explained, placing the sealed envelope on Roland's desk. Fully screened and cleared by prison authorities. From Nora. Roland stared at the envelope, his expression guarded. What is it? I don't know. They checked it for anything dangerous, but they don't read legal correspondence. After Lionel left, Roland remained at his desk, the unopened envelope before him. Part of him wanted to burn it unread. Nora had lost the right to communicate with him the moment she planted that explosive device in their home. But another part, the tactician, the strategist, knew that information was always valuable, regardless of its source. Finally, he carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single document, an unsent letter from Nora to Elijah Ward, dated 2 days before the explosion. It had been authenticated by the prison authorities, who had verified it against other samples of Nora's writing from Strat-CC records. Roland began to read, Elijah, I can't go through with this. Not the way you want. Roland deserves the truth, not an accident that takes away his life and his daughter's. I agreed to the financial arrangements, the manipulated contracts, even our relationship, but I never agreed to murder. Especially not Marley. That I know what you'll say, that it's too late, that we're too deeply involved, that there's no way out now except forward. But there has to be another option. Roland is many things, but he's not unreasonable. If I explain, if I offer to return what we've taken, I don't expect you to understand. You've never had a child. You've never watched someone trust you completely, the way Marley trusts me. I can't betray that trust, not even for you, not even for what we've planned, that I'm not backing out of our financial arrangement. I still want the life we've discussed, but I need to do this my way. I need to at least give Roland the chance to understand before we disappear that I know you won't like this. I know you'll say I'm being weak, but some lines shouldn't be crossed, even by people like us." Roland set the letter down, a complex mixture of emotions churning inside him. If this was genuine, and the authentication suggested it was, then Nora had experienced second thoughts before the explosion. Not enough to stop it, not enough to warn him, but enough to express doubt. Did it change anything? The device had still been planted. The plan had still gone forward. Whether Nora had momentary qualms or not, she had chosen Ward and money over her family's lives. Roland carefully returned the letter to its envelope and walked to the fireplace. The rational part of him argued that the document should be preserved, filed away with the other evidence. But something deeper, something raw and human needed the finality of its destruction. He watched as the paper caught flame, curling and blackening before dissolving into ash. Whatever momentary hesitation Nora might have felt, whatever belated conscience had prompted her to write those words, it changed nothing about what she had done. It earned her no forgiveness. Justice had been served. That would have to be enough. The sound of laughter from outside drew his attention. Through the window, he could see Marley and Raven returning from their hike, both of them carrying small baskets of wildflowers and berries. Marley was talking animatedly, her hands moving to illustrate whatever story she was telling, while Raven listened with genuine interest. This was what mattered now. Not Nora's too-late regrets or Ward's imprisonment, but the life they were rebuilding from the wreckage of Betrayal. The community center hummed with activity, the spring festival bringing together families from across the county. Bright banners hung from the rafters, local artisans displayed their crafts at wooden booths, and children darted between attractions with the boundless energy of youth. Roland stood near the refreshment table, watching as Marley participated in a group art project. At 7.5, she had grown taller, her face losing some of its baby roundness. But it was the change in her demeanor that marked the true passage of time, the easy smile, the confident way she interacted with other children, the absence of the haunted look that had shadowed her eyes for so long after the explosion. "She's thriving," Raven observed, joining him with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Roland. "Ms. Henderson says she's one of the most engaged students in her class." Roland nodded, accepting the coffee. The nightmares have almost stopped, just one in the past month. It had been nearly a year since the sentencing, 15 months since the explosion that had shattered their old life. Healing had come in small increments. Marley's first genuine laugh, her willingness to sleep with the light off, her ability to talk about Nora without dissolving into confusion and tears. "Any word on the appeal?" Raven asked, her voice low. "Denied. Again." Roland's expression remained neutral. Nora's attorney tried to argue that new evidence suggested she was under duress, but the judge didn't buy it. "Good." Raven's response was simple but firm. In the months since moving into the cabin, she had become Marley's fiercest advocate, a blend of protector, teacher, and maternal figure who asked no quarter for those who had harmed the child she'd come to love. Across the room, Penny was demonstrating henna designs at her booth, a line of eager teenagers waiting for the intricate temporary tattoos. Lionel sat nearby, ostensibly monitoring the book exchange table, but actually keeping a watchful eye on the entire gathering, old habits of surveillance dying hard among their unusual family unit. "Daddy, look what I made." Marley came running over, holding up a colorful piece of artwork, a woodland scene with a cabin, surrounded by figures that represented their household. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," Roland praised, genuinely impressed by the detail. "Is that all of us at the cabin?" Marley nodded enthusiastically. "That's you and Ms. Raven, and Aunt Penny with her tattoo stuff, and Uncle Lionel with his books. And that's me and Felix in the middle." Felix, the new puppy that Penny had brought home 2 months ago, claiming it was for security, but clearly intended as therapy for Marley. The German Shepherd mix had quickly become Marley's constant companion. As the afternoon progressed, Roland found himself drawn into community conversations, discussing security improvements for the local school, offering advice on wilderness safety for the summer camping program. Slowly, carefully, he was reintegrating into a world beyond the tight circle of protection he had drawn around Marley and himself. Later, as they prepared to leave, Marley ran ahead to where Penny was packing up her booth, eager to help her aunt carry supplies to the car. Roland and Raven followed at a more measured pace. "You could have killed them," Raven observed quietly, continuing a conversation they had circled around before but never fully addressed. "With your skills, your contacts, no one would have known." Roland watched Marley laughing with Penny, the sound carrying across the community center. "This was worse for them, and better for us." Raven studied his profile. "Because they have to live with it. Because we do." Roland turned to meet her gaze. "Death would have been quick. Final. This way, justice continues every day they wake up in those cells. And Marley gets to grow up knowing that systems can work, that bad actions have consequences that fit the crime. Not revenge, but justice." Raven nodded slowly. "I think I understand." "Besides," Roland added, his voice taking on a hint of the coldness that emerged whenever he discussed Nora and Ward. "Living with loss is harder than dying. They lost everything: freedom, reputation, future. I wanted them to feel that loss every day, the way they intended us to feel nothing ever again." "Daddy, can we get ice cream on the way home?" Marley called, running back toward them with Felix's leash in hand, the puppy bounding alongside her. Roland smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in a way it rarely had before. "I think that's an excellent idea." As they walked toward the parking lot, Marley skipping ahead with the puppy, Roland felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with vengeance and everything to do with the future they were building. They didn't just survive. They finished what others had started. And they remembered not just the betrayal, but the strength they had found in its aftermath. It was enough. It was everything.